Hi everyone, my name is Selena and thanks for coming back to the channel, and this is going to be the third in video where I try to wrap up the books that I read in the past school year. So I've done two previous videos, and these are the books that I've read just for pleasure, for fun, had nothing to do with pedagogy, with my curriculum, or anything, or my classes or anything like that. So I have three books, two technically, but three that I want to wrap this, I guess now it's a series because there's three videos, series with. And so I'll get into that in just a quick second. I did want to discuss why I have a different angle. This channel is going to be in flux a lot, probably because I'm still trying to find my way. I'm also redoing my shelves. I've tried to do the color-coded shelves that I've seen on Bookstagram and on various booktubers pages, and I realized that it's just not for me. I'm not an aesthetically minded person, at least not in that way. So yeah, I'm rearranging my shelves and all that. Maybe I'll give you a quick glance at what the chaos looks like right now. But I'm rearranging my shelves back to the way that I personally enjoy, which is by last name, alpha order of the author. So that's a big endeavor, and hopefully today will be the last day that I am reorganizing these shelves. Okay, so into the books that I read, I have three, like I said, that I wanted to discuss. I wanted to revisit Interworld by Neil Gaiman and Michael Reeves. And again, if I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes. I feel like I went very quickly through that this book in that last video because like I said, my camera was running out of space and I was trying to wrap up the video real quick because anyway, and I don't like to edit, so it was what it was. But I think I'm going to revisit it just so that I give it the time that is due, and then I'll talk about the last two books. So Interworld by Neil Gaiman and Michael Reeves. It's a mashup of science fiction and fantasy. There's a character whose first name I believe is Jacob, Jay, something like that. And he is a middle school age kid, and he has the ability to walk between worlds. And in this world that in this series of books, and this is the first in a series, the world it takes the multiverse view of many worlds, and so some worlds are more leaning toward fantasy type settings, and then other worlds are leaning more toward science fiction type settings. And so the problem is that there are villains who want to make science fiction worlds more fantasy, and then I believe later on in the books there are other villains who want to make more fantasy worlds more science fiction. And so all of these Jacobs, Jays, Joshua's, whatever the protagonist's name is, the main protagonist finds that there are other versions of him in all these other different worlds, and there's some worlds where he is a she. There's some worlds where he is an android. There's some worlds where this protagonist has wings. It's quite what's the word I'm looking for? It's fun. It's very much Neil Gaiman. It reminded me a lot of was it Fortunately the Milk by Neil Gaiman. It's just a very fun middle grade kind of romp. I wouldn't say frivolous, light. Maybe that's the word. I'll just go with light. It has a very light air to it, but he is working with all the other versions of himself and from all these different multiverse versions of himself to stop the villains from making the worlds become unbalanced. And so that is his main goal, and he, like I said, is trying to make this happen. I think it was fun. It was a quick read. I listened to this on audio. It's, there's nothing too deep about it. It's a middle grade read, but it was just lighthearted. It made me smile and laugh at certain points. So I would recommend this if someone's just looking for maybe like a palate cleanser. I think this is a great palate cleanse type read, because there's nothing too much in it that will stay with you too long, but there's also nothing in it that should kind of like eek and push you away. I'm going to move on to the next book now. I think I've sat on that one for a little longer than I wanted to. Next, I read We Are the Ants, and I'm so glad I read Interworld before I read We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson, I believe. Sean David Hutchinson. Whoa. So I picked this up because of Spence at Common Spence recommended this a lot, and I was intrigued just because he seemed to be really enthusiastic about this book. I really enjoyed it, but it is heavy. And so those of you out there who are sensitive to triggers, or who are conscious of those things or cognizant of those things in your reading, I would say go into this wary, slowly, and cautiously. But I did read it. It took me a while to read, and it's one of those books, unlike Interworld, this is a book that stays with you. I read it and I couldn't even write a review of it right away. And I think in some levels I'm still processing this book. I feel very much like how I felt at the end of Catcher in the Rye and Perks of Being a Wallflower. They both have problems in it that I just can't reconcile, but they also speak to things that are true and that are honest. There's lots of raw emotion in this, and it's not covered up at all. So let me talk about the book now. It is about a young man named Henry in high school, and he is bullied for many things. He's bullied because he apparently is abducted by aliens, and so he tells us that these aliens want him to push a button, and whether he pushes this button or not will determine the fate of the world, basically. And so he is an abductee, but no one really quite believes him, and so he's being bullied for that. He's also being bullied because he's dealing with depression, and this is where the triggers come in. So if that's something that you're concerned with, I would say caution further listening to this video. But he's triggered because of the suicide of his boyfriend, and he can't quite understand why his boyfriend did what he did. He still loves this person, but he is angry that this person took away their love, took their life away from him, and he's lastly being bullied physically by someone because of his vulnerability, because of his dealing with depression. This one character takes advantage of this vulnerability to bully him physically and mentally. It deals with sexual abuse, mental abuse. It's really raw. See, let me think if there's anything else that I wanted to say about this. I'm not sure if I want to say much more about it. So if you want to talk more about this book, maybe we can have a conversation down below. I would recommend Spence's channel. Go to his channel to see more about this book or to hear more about this book if you're really interested. He does a much more eloquent job of discussing this text than I am right now. The last book that I read during the school year for fun was Underground Airlines by Ben H. Winters. I'm not a big fan of this book. I don't know. So the plot is that there is a man. He's a former slave and a former escaped slave. And when he was caught, by the U.S. Marshals, he turns to work for them instead of going back down to the South to be a slave. He turns and works for them to catch other fugitive slaves. Now, the hook or the big idea of this book is that this is either a contemporary or a near future alternate history of the United States, where Abraham Lincoln was shot before he became president, and then therefore there was no Civil War. And so there are still some states that have slavery and then states that don't, and they're just kind of like this compromise that was established between the two belief systems, or the two ideas of slavery. And so there are states that have slaves, states that don't have slaves. What's quite eerie is how similar that world looks to our world, even though we've had the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement. There are certain elements of this world and this depicted in this book that are quite similar. I think that was the point that this book was trying to make, is that while we believe we've come so very far in the 150 years since slavery was abolished, we haven't really. I might give this book a reread because I'm not sure if I was in the right state of mind to receive what was being said. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think I had the most problems with the main character. I did not feel any sympathy for him and his plight, and then I also had issues with the female, I guess the female lead or the female protagonist in this. I can't recall her name right now. Did I write it down? No, I didn't. But it had some semblance of white savior issues in it that I'm just not a fan of. She is a good woman. She has a past, and our main character, who is a black man, is trying to go about his business, do his job, but he seems to be coming around and changing his ideas and morals or his ways of thinking because of his interaction with her. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that yet. So far I don't like it, but like I said, I probably should give this one a reread. It didn't do a lot of hard digging. It seems very like surface level to me, and so things like they were still listening to Michael Jackson. So in this alternate history, Michael Jackson was still a thing. Was still, a very popular music artist. In this world, Louis Armstrong was still a popular musician, yet he came from one of the states that had slavery, and he still was a popular musician. I'm not sure how that would work because being a slave would mean that you don't get much time to explore your talents in that way, especially being a musician. So, oh, my battery is low, so I'm gonna have to wrap this up. I'm always running into issues like this. So anyway, I think I'm going to stop here. I am more willing to talk about these books in depth down in the discussion below, but that concludes all the books I read for fun, for pleasure during the school year. And now that that's done, I can feel free to talk about the books that I'm reading for this summer. So, bye everyone.